Hi, welcome to the Rittner Floral School in Boston, Mass. I'm Dr. Steve Rittner, and it's a pleasure to welcome you into one of our classrooms today. We got a neat video for you. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. I know I say that all the time, but I really mean it. I think you are. And the topic of this particular video is going to be a little bit different, and it's a response to questions. I constantly get questions from my students, from graduates of our floral design school, and also from many of you out there who either are following us on YouTube or checking out our various albums of photos and things on our Facebook page. And one common question that I've been receiving a lot of, and it's an interesting one, is how do I get started on a floral design? How do I organize myself in terms of coming up with a piece of floral art? And that's an interesting question. And there's no one way of solving that one or answering that one, but there are a variety of different approaches that one could use. And I'd like to share with you today one strategy that might be useful to you, because I find it certainly is helpful to me. And it's a little secret, and I'm going to be sharing it with you. I guess it won't be a secret after today's video, but it is a little secret, and it's an approach and a way of looking at floral art. Now, we can look at floral art from many different ways, but one way that I like to look at it that helps me organize my thinking when I'm doing floral designing is to consider some of the shapes and materials that I'm using. For example, when I'm doing a floral design, I could be using materials like branchy stuff. Branchy stuff is always a very, very interesting kind of thing. It gives a dynamism to our designs, and it's considered very, very chi-chi, frou-frou at the present time. Then there are different kinds of shapes of our flowers. There are flowers out there, like our bells of Ireland, that are very, very linear. Things like bells of Ireland, gladiolas, snapdragon, things like this feel very, very linear, and they fill space in a very unique way. And then there are also different other kinds of materials out there, and things that are form flowers, shapes. In other words, they either have a very unique shape to them or a mass to them, and these have a very, very different kind of visual impact than our linear materials or our branchy type stuff. Now, there are other things too out there, like filler materials, berries, and things like that. But I find that sometimes when I'm trying to come up with a way of starting my floral art, that one way that I can do it is by considering some of these various elements. And that's what we're going to do today. And I think you're going to find it kind of cool. And for example, I'm going to start off on my design by taking some branchy stuff. I went down in my basement and I found some branchy stuff. And there are all kinds of branchy things out there that you can use. But obviously, branchy materials definitely have a certain kind of impact. They make a certain kind of visual statement. And in starting off with my branchy stuff, we certainly are already creating a certain kind of personality for our design. And so I'm going to start with branchy things to begin with on this piece. And by doing so, come up with a rubric or a way of kind of organizing my thinking on this. And I think you'll find this is an interesting way of looking at it. Let's take a little bit more branchy stuff. Now, there are all kinds of branchy things out there that you can use in your floral art. And I'm just grabbing some miscellaneous things that I happen to pick from some of my storage shelves that I thought were kind of interesting to start creating this particular piece. So I'm starting with my branchy stuff. And I'm going to take it and I'm working it through to kind of create my overall pattern or shape. And this is going to be a fairly good sized design. We could do this on a smaller scale if we wanted to as well. Now, remember I mentioned different kinds of materials. I mentioned that there were branchy things, there are linear items. Well, I happen to like linear, and I love bells of Ireland because I think they're really, really quite cool. And so I'm going to take some of my bells of Ireland, and I'm going to start working some of my bells into my design so that I have another element, but this time I'm going to be working using something that essentially is linear and using that as a contrast to my branchy stuff. So notice what I'm doing. I'm basing the way I go about this floral piece based on the shapes and the particular kinds of patterns that I have. So I'm going to take another bell and work it in here. And I'm crisscrossing them a little bit. We can go in so many different directions on this stuff. I'm going to take another one and work it up over here and really come up with something fairly good sized on this. And then I can take another one and place another one over onto the side. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I could place it in this direction. The nice thing about bells is sometimes they're straight, sometimes they crisscross in all kinds of different directions. So notice that so far I played with two of my major ideas. I started with my branchy stuff, then I played with some linear kinds of things as well. Now, I did mention that there's a whole slew of different things that we could consider in the range of mass or shape type things. And I'm going to use that next because I have some very, very pretty mass shape type things in the form of some of my lilies. And so I'm going to use them. They fill space. They create a great focal. I could stop at this point if I wanted to, but I want to add a little bit more to bulk it up and make it feel like there's more content there. Some people love the minimalist kind of look, and that's all good and fine, but I tend to like adding content so that nobody feels that they didn't get enough in a design. And so I'm adding another piece coming up here. Again, I could stop at this point if I wanted to, but I'm going to jazz it up just a little bit more by adding another piece of my lily right over here. The advantage, of course, of a flower like lily is that it's got a very, very distinctive shape. It fills space very, very quickly, and it gives just an amazing kind of effect. Now, I also have a little bit more in terms of some of my lily buds and so forth, and I'm going to work a little bit more by taking another piece and working it over onto this side. So notice that I have a very, very definite pattern that I'm following. I started with my branches. I continued on this design using some of my linear materials, and now I placed some of my mass form materials there. Now we can also play within that in another way. In other words, we can play with mass form, but we can also come up with contrast. For example, Alstroemeria. It gives me contrast in color. It gives me a slight contrast in shape, and it's definitely a very, very unique kind of shape to our flower, but it also is going to help me bulk it up in an interesting way. So I can work a few of those in here or there into my design. And I have a piece over here. I've got another piece here. Let's work another one over onto this side very, very carefully. Notice I'm not using a huge amount of material, my viewer, in this design. What I have here is essentially some branchy stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my bells of Ireland, and essentially a few pieces, a couple of stems of my lilies worked in as a focal with 3 stems of my Alstroemeria worked in around it. It doesn't use a lot of material, yet make no mistake about it, my viewer, this design definitely has plenty of content. My flowers are covering most of my mechanics, but I do want to make sure that my mechanics are covered. I could have used some of my foliage materials, and some of you may prefer to go that particular route, and there's nothing wrong with that. I am, however, taking some of my moss materials, some of my sheet moss, and I'm working a few pieces of sheet moss into this design, holding them in place with some pieces of wire, and that way I can just kind of sneak a little in there. Obviously, we would make sure that all of our mechanics are nicely covered. So what do you think, my viewer? I've done a design here in front of you, step by step. It is a design that's impressive, it's showy, but it shows you a method of looking at floral art, a method of designing. If you're not sure how to come up with something that might be interesting or unusual, or a way of looking at it, one secret that I'm sharing with you today, I guess not a secret anymore, is look at the various kinds of materials that we're using, and let's methodically go through it. I started with my branchy stuff to come up with an overall pattern or shape on my design. I followed it with a linear product, and I wasn't afraid to crisscross them and have them kind of zooping up in different directions. And then finally I went to a mass form kind of material, such as my lilies, and then another kind that gave me a little bit of contrast with my alstroemeria. By designing that way, I can come up with something that is pretty darn neat, quick and easy. And at Rittner's Floral School, by now you know, we believe that floral designing should be quick, easy, and fun. I hope, my viewer, you enjoyed this little tip in terms of how to go about your designing. On behalf of all of us here at Rittner's Floral School, I'm Dr. Steve Rittner. We thank you for viewing this video today.